And Karen Hussey will talk about an energy future that has been talked about for many years in electrification and its impact. The electrification, I think, of literally everything. What kind of impact would that have? I'm not sure you're going to address that directly. But is the electric power sector really ready for massive electrification? And how will this likely to affect national energy grids? And what will be the impact on this kind of stress nexus that we talk about with water and energy use and distribution? So, Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Apologies for not sitting down. I'm much better on my feet. I'm very grateful to be here, so thank you very much to the Yale Climate and Energy Institute. I'm grateful to be here for different reasons to Zhang. He was very pleased to get away from the smoke and the smog. I was very grateful to see some real rain. So thank you very much. I could do without the cold, though. That's a struggle today. So, as Dave said, I was asked to focus particularly on the electricity sector. And today I want to focus on three emerging or continuing developments that affect very strongly our capacity to generate electricity and decisions around where and how we can generate electricity. So I want to discuss those three issues and then conclude very briefly with what I think the consequences might be for electricity production moving forward, particularly the actors involved in the business models that will underpin electricity in the future. So the first issue, which is very close to my heart and which has been touched on already, is the electricity sector's demand for water. And it's my contention and others that this nexus between electricity or energy generally, but electricity particularly, and water is going to place increasing constraints on where and how electricity can be generated. To give you just a very quick sort of précis on that link between energy and water, just consider for a moment that to produce 1 liter of petroleum oil requires anything from 7 to 15 liters of water. To produce natural gas, you're looking at 20 to 50 liters of water per barrel of equivalent oil. And in terms of hydraulic fracking, which is a major concern in Australia and I know in the United States as well, you can be looking at anything from 8 to 30 million liters of water produced per well. Okay. So the relationship between energy and water is very, very strong. And we're only really starting to come to grips with that now. The risks posed by water to electricity in particular are fourfold. The first is very obvious. It's water availability. Okay? Do we have enough water to be able to cool our power plants, to be able to extract those gas and oil reserves? The second is an increasing ambient water temperature. It's very difficult to use water as a coolant if it's already warm, right? And we have found this to be a real problem in Australia. The third is increasing variability, which exists anyway, but is going to be exacerbated by climate change. And the fourth is not mentioned very much at all in any of the literature, and that is the other impacts of climate change that are going to have an effect on critical infrastructure. So we're seeing increasing cyclones, increasing flooding, and even increasing bushfires in Australia and elsewhere in the world, which is affecting your assets. Right? We're seeing plants destroyed or at least affected by floods, bushfires, cyclones, and the like. And so this is expensive, which will ultimately be passed on to the consumer. So it's a very real problem, and it has very real impacts almost everywhere in the world. We saw a very sort of perverse outcome from the delay in the monsoonal rains in India a couple of years ago, which meant that there was an increased demand for groundwater pumping in the absence of the monsoonal rains, which of course put enormous pressure on the electricity sector in India. We've seen in the United States, in Australia, in France, in Germany, nuclear power plants and other power plants have to shut down and interrupt energy supply because of an absence of available water resources. Okay? So it's a real problem and it's very much alive. Once you throw land into the mix and you bring in the consequences for agricultural production and food prices, all bets are off. And in 2009, we saw what happens when you have a spike in staple food products. I should also point out that there is no particular technology that is immune from this problem, right? The most obvious is hydroelectricity, right? But it doesn't stop there. Any kind of thermal power generation is vulnerable to scarce water resources. Anything that uses water as a coolant is vulnerable to increase in ambient water temperature. Okay, fracking is another one. Biofuels, it's off the chart in terms of water resource consumption. So I think understanding the nexus and starting to act on it is going to have three consequences. The first is, we're already seeing this, is we're going to see changes in standards around energy efficiency, around where you can site electricity generation plants. There's going to be a whole suite of water triggers within the regulatory arrangements to ensure that sensible decisions are made. We're also going to see things like cogeneration, where instead of using fresh water resources, we might see desalination used, and we'll just cop the energy cost of that. We may well see more efficient and interconnected electricity markets to promote greater flexibility. Right? We have a national electricity market in Australia, so when we can't use our hydro facility down south, we can buy energy from up north. Right? Now, that's great for us, but it's my contention that we might actually see greater, more flexible, competitive, integrated energy markets and electricity markets in places like Southeast Asia, okay, where this issue starts to get more and more live as they develop further. The most exciting aspect of this to me, and I share Dan's enthusiasm about renewable energy technology, is that it just makes that argument to use renewable energy technologies that much more compelling. Okay? Now, the knock-on consequences of that, which I get very tickled pink about, is the potential for distributed energy storage technologies to be a support mechanism to enable that renewable energy penetration. And I don't want to trample all over this afternoon's panel, but suffice it to say that in Australia, in the United States, in parts of Europe, there have been some amazing initiatives just in the last 3 years around pilot projects for distributed energy storage. And what that is precipitating in Australia, at any rate, is new business models. So just this week in Australia, the Macquarie Bank Group applied to be an energy retailer. Right? It applied for electricity retail license. Right? So it's my contention that if we see more renewables, we see more distributed energy storage, we're going to see different actors, different people will be producing energy. Right? And that's going to require a whole shift in our regulatory framework. So that was the second issue. I forgot to start with that. The third issue is the persistent price differentials that exist between regions for electricity. Okay? In Europe and in Japan, they pay at the moment, 3 times as much for their electricity. The World Energy Outlook report from last year suggests that by 2035, they'll still be paying twice as much for electricity as the United States. That has profound implications for energy-intensive production, particularly energy-intensive trade-exposed commodities. So where I think this brings us to, if we take the water, energy, and more recently the land nexus, combined with the penetration of renewable energy technologies and what I think that means for energy storage, plus the potential for greater incentive for integrated grids, more competitive, more flexible integrated electricity grids in places where they're not currently integrated, I think we see a number of consequences. And like Neil, please don't make investment decisions based on this. I think we're going to see fundamental reform and eventually transformation of the electricity sector in a number of ways. We're going to see reform of pricing, particularly to account for the externalities of water impacts. We're going to see new business models, right? New actors, but new risks that come with those new business models. and I'll go into that in detail in question time if you like. I think we're going to see two weird things happen. And as a political scientist, of course, I'm focused on the role of the state and who's doing what. I think we're going to see two things happen. One is we're going to have increasingly decentralized, distributed electricity sectors. So we've got more actors, we've got really innovative, different business models, and we've got distributed energy technologies, renewable plus storage. But I think we're at the international level, we're going to see much more integration and cooperation and collaboration to allow for those very real climate risks and water risks simply to bring about greater energy security. So I think it's an exciting space, and I'm happy to explore any or all of that in questions.